The first time she saw him, the whole town went quiet. It was not the kind of silence that falls at night when lamps are blown out and doors are bolted. It was the kind that creeps in slow and heavy, when every pair of eyes turns toward the same shadow, and no one dares to speak first. The wind carried dust down the empty main street, brushing past wooden storefronts and hitching posts, rattling the loose sign of the general store. In the middle of that lonely street stood a covered wagon, its canvas top worn from long miles on the trail. Beside it stood a man the town had hoped never to see again. And across from him, with her chin lifted and her hands steady at her sides, stood a bride who had run out of choices. She had arrived in town 3 days earlier, wearing a blue traveling dress that had seen better years and carrying a small leather case that held everything she owned. Folks had whispered about her the moment she stepped off the stagecoach. A woman alone was always a story waiting to be told in a place like this. Some said she was running from something. Some said she had been foolish enough to answer a mail-order bride advertisement. Others claimed she was just another dreamer who thought the West would be kinder than the life she left behind. They were wrong on all counts. She had not come chasing adventure. She had come chasing survival. Back east, her father's debts had swallowed their farm whole. The bankmen had taken the land, the house, even the old rocking chair her mother used to sit in on summer evenings. When her father fell ill soon after, there was nothing left but hospital bills and hard words from men who did not care how a young woman might manage on her own. Marriage had been the only door left open to her, and she had walked through it with her head high and her heart locked tight. The man she was meant to marry was a rancher on the edge of town. He was known to be steady and well off, though twice her age. It was not love she expected, only safety. A roof that would not be taken, a table with bread upon it. In the West, that was sometimes enough. But on the morning of the wedding, the rancher did not appear. Instead, word spread that he had ridden out at dawn and had not returned. His horse came back alone near noon, saddle torn and reins dragging in the dirt. No one needed to say what that meant. Trouble had a way of finding men who rode too far into the mountains. By afternoon, the whispers had changed direction. Some pitied the bride who had lost her groom before she could even claim his name. Others muttered that perhaps she carried bad luck with her. A few cruel tongues suggested she should be grateful she had not tied herself to a man who might not live through the week. She heard every word, she answered none. And then he rode in, the mountain man. He did not ride like the polished ranchers who tipped their hats to ladies. He sat his horse like he belonged to the wilderness more than any town. His coat was brown leather, scarred and weathered. A wide-brim hat shadowed a face lined by sun and wind. A thick beard framed a mouth set in a hard line. A rifle rested easy in his saddle as if it were an extra limb. Children were pulled indoors when he passed. Doors closed with soft thuds. Even grown men shifted their weight and looked away. They said he lived high in the mountains where snow lingered long after spring. They said he trapped and hunted and spoke more to wolves than to people. Some claimed he had once been part of a gang that terrorized wagon trains. Others insisted he had saved a family from a blizzard and vanished before dawn. No one agreed on the truth, but everyone agreed on one thing. He was not a man to cross. He dismounted in the center of town and tied his horse to the post in front of the empty saloon. The rancher's younger brother approached him first, hat clenched in nervous hands. Their conversation was low and brief. The mountain man's eyes lifted once, scanning the street, and landed on her. That was when the silence fell. She did not step back. She did not look away. In that single glance, she felt the weight of the mountains in him. There was something wild there, something that did not bow to rules or gossip. Yet beneath the rough edges, she sensed something else, something careful and watchful. He crossed the street toward her, boots striking the packed dirt with slow certainty. The covered wagon behind her creaked as the wind tugged at its canvas. She had planned to leave town by sunset, to find work somewhere, anywhere, before the little money she had left ran dry. But now she stood rooted in place as he stopped a few feet away. "You're the bride," he said. His voice was deep, rough as gravel, but not unkind. "I was," she replied. A faint flicker passed through his eyes at that. "They found tracks in the North Pass," he continued. Your groom rode into bad ground. Might still be alive. Hope is a dangerous thing when you have already prepared yourself for grief. It rushed through her so fast it nearly took her breath. Around them, townsfolk leaned from doorways and windows, pretending not to listen. "Will you bring him back?" she asked. He studied her face as if searching for something hidden there. Fear, perhaps, desperation, regret. "I can try," he said at last. "But the mountains don't give up what they take without a fight." A murmur rippled through the street. Some shook their heads. Others watched her, waiting to see if she would beg or break. She surprised them all. "I'm coming with you." Gasps broke the quiet. "No," he answered immediately. "Yes," she said just as firmly. "If he's alive, I'll be there when you find him. And if he's not, I won't wait here for scraps of news and pity." He looked at her as if she had spoken in another language. Women in town did not talk that way. Not to him. "You don't know what you're asking," he said. "I know exactly what I'm asking," she replied. "I've crossed half the country alone." "I can ride?" A muscle tightened in his jaw. He glanced at the faces watching them, at the rancher's brother who seemed unsure whether to object or encourage. The mountain man was used to traveling alone. He trusted no one. Yet something in her steady gaze held him. Finally, he gave a single nod. "Be ready at first light." By dawn, the town had a new story to chew on. The desperate bride riding into the mountains with the feared mountain man. Some said it was madness. Some said it was fate. Most said it would end badly. They rode out side by side, leaving the safety of wooden walls and gossip behind. The land shifted quickly from open plain to rocky hills. Pine trees thickened around them, and the air grew colder. She kept pace without complaint, though her hands stiffened on the reins and her legs ached from the unfamiliar saddle. He spoke little. When he did, it was to point out a narrow trail or warn her of loose stones. Yet she sensed he was watching her, measuring her strength, testing her resolve. By midday, they reached the North Pass. The ground there told a story of struggle, hoofprints cut deep into the mud. Broken branches lay scattered. A dark stain marked the earth near a fallen rock. She slid from her horse before he could stop her and knelt beside the mark. It was dried now, but there was no mistaking what it had been. "He was here," she whispered. The mountain man crouched nearby, studying the tracks. His expression was unreadable. "He was not alone," he said quietly. Her heart stilled. "What do you mean?" He pointed to another set of prints, heavier and more numerous. Riders, at least 3. They came down from higher ground. Outlaws. The word hung between them without being spoken. She swallowed hard. The West was full of men who took what they wanted. A lone rancher riding into the mountains was easy prey. "Is he alive?" she asked. The mountain man rose slowly. "There's no body." That counts for something. It was not comfort, but it was not despair either. They followed the trail deeper into the mountains. The path narrowed, forcing them to ride single file. The sun dipped behind jagged peaks, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for them. More than once she felt the urge to turn back. Each time she forced herself forward. Toward evening they reached a small clearing tucked between towering rocks. Smoke curled faintly in the distance. He raised a hand, signaling her to stop. "Stay here," he murmured. "I'm not staying behind," she replied. His eyes flashed, not with anger but with something close to worry. "This isn't town gossip," he said. "If those riders are who I think they are, they won't hesitate." "And neither will I," she answered. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. The wind carried the scent of pine and distant fire. Somewhere above, a hawk cried. He gave a slow exhale. "Then stay close?" They dismounted and moved on foot, stepping carefully over stones and roots. As they edged closer, voices drifted through the trees, rough laughter, the clink of metal. A man's low groan. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Through a gap in the rocks, she saw them. 3 men gathered around a small fire. And tied to a tree, bruised but breathing, was the rancher she had been meant to marry. Relief washed over her so strong it nearly brought her to her knees. Beside her, the mountain man's posture changed. He was no longer just a quiet guide. He was something sharp and focused, a force honed by years of surviving alone. He leaned close, his voice barely more than a breath against her ear. "When I move, you run to him. Don't look back." She nodded, though fear coiled tight in her chest. He shifted his grip on his rifle. In that suspended second, before action shattered the stillness, she realized something that frightened her more than the outlaws ever could. If he fell, if the mountains claimed him as they had nearly claimed her groom, the thought of losing him would hurt more than she was prepared to admit. He met her eyes one last time. Then he stepped out from the shadows. He stepped out from the shadows as if he had been carved from the mountain itself. The men by the fire froze. One reached for his gun, another rose halfway to his feet. The third narrowed his eyes, trying to place the figure who had just appeared in the fading light. The mountain man did not shout. He did not rush. He stood there with a stillness that made the air feel thin. "You picked the wrong trail," he said. His voice carried steady across the clearing. The outlaw closest to the fire gave a short laugh, but it held no real humor. "We're just passing through." "Untie him," the mountain man replied. The bride did not wait for another word. She darted from behind the rocks, heart pounding, boots slipping on loose gravel. She reached the tree where the rancher was bound. His face was swollen, his shirt torn, but his eyes were open. They widened when he saw her. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. "I'm not leaving you," she whispered, working at the knots with trembling fingers. Behind her, the clearing shifted with tension. She could hear boots scuffing dirt, the snap of a branch under a careless step. No gunshots rang out, but the threat of them hung heavy. She forced herself not to look back. The rope gave way under her tug. The rancher sagged forward, and she caught him as best she could. "Can you stand?" she asked. He nodded weakly. The mountain man's voice came again, low and controlled. "You've taken enough," one of the outlaws spat into the fire. "You don't own these hills." A beat of silence followed. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then the mountain man moved. She did not see every motion. She saw only flashes, a sudden lunge, a cry of surprise. The crack of wood striking rock. She kept her focus on helping the rancher upright, pulling his arm over her shoulders. The sound of a scuffle broke behind them, but there were no gunshots, only grunts and the thud of bodies hitting the ground. "Go!" the mountain man ordered. She did not hesitate. She guided the rancher toward the horses, fear driving her steps faster than reason. By the time she dared to glance back, two of the outlaws were scrambling to their feet, retreating toward the trees. The third lay groaning near the fire, clutching his arm. The mountain man stood between them and the path, chest rising slow and steady. They did not stay to test him again. Within minutes, the clearing emptied of everyone but the three of them. Smoke drifted upward, and the fire crackled as if nothing had happened. She helped the rancher onto his horse. The mountain man mounted his own without a word. They rode until the smoke faded behind them and the sky turned deep blue. Only when they reached a narrow ridge did he signal for them to stop. The rancher slid down from the saddle with a wince. "I owe you," he muttered. "You owe her," the mountain man said, nodding toward the bride. The rancher's gaze shifted to her, filled with gratitude and something else she could not quite name. Shame, perhaps, or surprise. "I didn't think you'd come," he admitted. "I said I would," she answered. They made camp in a sheltered hollow. The mountain man built a small fire, careful to keep it low and hidden. He moved with quiet skill, as if the woods answered to him. As night settled, the bride sat a short distance away, knees drawn close, staring into the flames. The rancher rested on a blanket, his breathing slow but uneasy. The mountain man handed her a tin cup of water. "You should sleep," he said. "I'm not tired. You are," he replied. "You just don't feel it yet." She took the cup, fingers brushing his for the briefest second. A strange warmth flickered through her that had nothing to do with the fire. "Why were they up here?" she asked after a moment. He poked at the embers with a stick. "That wasn't chance." Her stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "They were waiting," he said. "Not for me." "For him." She looked toward the rancher, who appeared half asleep. "He doesn't have enemies," she said softly. "Everyone has enemies," the mountain man answered. The words settled heavily between them. She studied his face in the firelight. The hard lines seemed softer now, shadows easing the sharp edges. He looked less like a legend and more like a man carrying more history than he cared to share. "Why do they fear you?" she asked before she could stop herself. A faint smile touched his mouth, though it did not reach his eyes. "Fear is easier than truth." "And what is the truth?" He met her gaze. For a moment she thought he might answer. Instead he looked away toward the dark line of trees. "I keep to myself," he said simply. "That unsettles people." She considered that. She too had unsettled people by arriving alone, by speaking her mind, by riding into the mountains when others would have stayed behind. Perhaps fear grew where understanding failed, the fire burned low. Crickets sang in the brush, yet unease lingered. Near midnight the rancher stirred and groaned. She hurried to his side. "They said something," he murmured, eyes barely open. "Who did?" she asked. "The men," he whispered. "They said the land wasn't mine anymore." Her heart skipped. "What land?" He swallowed. "The north pasture." "They claimed someone else bought it?" "Said I'd soon be forced off." The mountain man rose from where he had been sitting. "Did you sell it?" "No," the rancher answered weakly. "I signed nothing." The bride's thoughts raced. If someone was trying to claim the rancher's land, kidnapping him would be one way to frighten him into giving it up. Or worse. Who would do that, she asked. The rancher's gaze flickered uncertainly. "There's been talk of a railroad coming through, investors buying up property cheap. But I never thought it would come to this." The word railroad sent a chill through her. Back east, she had seen towns change overnight when tracks were laid. Land became gold. Men who once farmed suddenly found strangers at their gates with contracts and pressure. The mountain man's jaw tightened. "I've seen what rail companies leave behind," he said quietly. She looked at him. "You've dealt with them?" He did not answer directly. "They don't ask twice." Silence stretched long and uneasy. If the rancher was being pushed out, then her future, the fragile security she had clung to, was crumbling again. Marriage would not save her if the land itself was stolen. And yet, as she glanced at the mountain man across the fire, another thought stirred, a dangerous one. What if her path had never truly been tied to the rancher? She pushed the idea away. It was foolish. She barely knew the mountain man. He was rumored to be wild, unpredictable. A life with him would not be one of comfort and steady fields. It would be harsh winters and long silences. But when she imagined leaving the mountains behind and returning to town, to whispers and uncertain plans, her chest felt tight. Morning came gray and cold. They rode back toward town at a slower pace, the rancher still weak but upright. The bride's mind churned with questions. As they neared the outskirts, she noticed something strange. A group of men stood gathered near the general store. Strangers. Their clothes were too fine for ranch work, their boots too clean. One of them turned as they approached. He tipped his hat politely, though his smile did not reach his eyes. "Welcome back," he called. The rancher stiffened in the saddle. "That's one of them," he whispered to her. The mountain man guided his horse slightly ahead, placing himself between the bride and the strangers without making it obvious. The well-dressed man stepped forward. "We were concerned when you did not return yesterday." "Dangerous trails up north," I managed, the rancher replied tightly. "Indeed," the man said, glancing briefly at the mountain man. "You should consider our offer more seriously." "Progress does not wait. We're not selling," the rancher said. The man's smile faded just a touch. "Everyone sells eventually," the bride felt the tension sharpen. Townsfolk watched from a distance, unsure which side to stand on. Change was coming, whether they wanted it or not. The stranger's gaze shifted to her. "And you must be the bride," she held his stare. "I am. Congratulations," he said smoothly. It would be unfortunate to begin married life in hardship. The meaning was clear. The mountain man's voice cut through the air. "You've said enough." The stranger studied him with cool interest. "And you are?" "Passing through," he replied. A faint smirk touched the stranger's lips. "I doubt that." For a moment it felt as though the entire town teetered on the edge of something larger than a simple land dispute. The mountains loomed behind them, silent witnesses. The bride sensed that saving the rancher from outlaws had only uncovered a deeper conflict. Powerful men with money and plans did not retreat easily. They would return, perhaps with papers and lawmen next time instead of ropes. As the strangers finally stepped back, promising to speak again soon, the rancher sagged with exhaustion. The mountain man turned to her quietly. "This isn't over, I know," she said. She looked from the rancher to the town, then to the mountains rising beyond. She had come west seeking safety in marriage. Instead, she had found herself standing between greed and grit, between the life she had planned and the one she had not dared imagine. And as she caught the mountain man watching her with that unreadable expression, she realized something else. The real storm had not yet broken. And when it did, she would have to choose which future she was willing to fight for. The town did not return to normal after that morning. It only pretended to. By noon, word had spread that men tied to a railroad company were circling the valley, offering contracts and making promises that sounded too smooth to trust. Some folks welcomed the idea of progress. They imagined new shops, more travelers, steady money flowing through the dusty streets. Others feared what tracks and smoke would bring. They feared rising prices, strangers with law papers, and the slow fading of the life they had carved out with their own hands. The bride walked beside the rancher as he made his way home, each step slower than the last. The mountain man rode ahead, scanning the road and tree line like he expected trouble to rise from the ground itself. When they reached the ranch house, the sight of it pulled at her heart. It was not grand, but it was solid. A wide porch, white paint faded by sun, a barn standing proud against the open sky. This had been her promised shelter. Her answer to hardship. Now it felt like a target. Inside, she helped the rancher sit at the kitchen table. His younger brother hovered nearby, wringing his hat. "They came by yesterday," the brother admitted. "Said they had legal claim to part of the north pasture. Showed papers with a seal on them. I didn't understand half of it." The rancher rubbed his temples. "I signed nothing. They claimed it was an old agreement from before you bought the place." The bride listened closely. She had grown up around contracts and debt collectors. She knew how easily ink on paper could be twisted. "Did you keep copies of your purchase?" she asked. "In the desk drawer," the rancher replied. She crossed the room and opened the drawer. Inside lay folded documents, worn but carefully preserved. She scanned the lines, searching for any mention of shared rights or future claims. The language was thick and formal, but nothing leaped out at her. The mountain man stepped inside, removing his hat. He did not sit. "They'll be back," he said. The rancher gave a bitter laugh. "You think I don't know that?" The bride looked between them. "If they can't force you with fear, they'll try law. If law doesn't work, they'll find another way." The room grew quiet. It struck her then how strange it was that she had been meant to marry this man for safety, yet she now stood as one of the strongest voices in his defense. Fear had a way of revealing who would bend and who would stand firm. Later that afternoon, she returned to town alone. She told the others she needed supplies, but truthfully, she wanted answers. The general store buzzed with talk. A group of farmers stood near the counter, arguing in low voices. "They offered me double what my land's worth," one said. "Double now," another replied. "What about 5 years from now when we're pushed out?" She kept her head down as she browsed the shelves, listening. Near the window stood the well-dressed stranger from earlier. He spoke with the town banker, their heads bent close together. The bride caught fragments of their conversation. Words like investment, expansion, inevitable. The stranger noticed her watching. He smiled again, polite and sharp as a blade. "Miss," he called lightly. "A moment, if you please." Every instinct told her to walk away. Instead, she approached. "I trust your trip to the mountains was successful," he said. "It was," she answered. "I'm glad to hear it." "I would hate for unfortunate accidents to delay progress." His meaning was clear. "Nothing that happened up north had been random?" "You speak of progress as though it belongs to you," she said evenly. "It belongs to the future," he corrected. "Tracks bring commerce. Commerce brings growth. Your town can either rise with it or be left behind. And the ranchers who lose their land? They will be compensated? According to whose measure?" His smile thinned. "You are a practical woman," he said. "Surely you understand that holding on to outdated ways helps no one." She thought of the ranch house, of the mountains glowing gold at sunset, of the hard-earned peace in those open fields. Sometimes, she replied, holding on is the only way to remain standing. For a flicker of a second, irritation flashed in his eyes. You would do well to advise your future husband wisely, he said. Stubborn men often regret their choices. She met his gaze without flinching. So do arrogant ones? The air between them cooled. He inclined his head, ending the exchange, but she could feel his attention linger as she left the store. Outside, she found the mountain man waiting by the hitching post. You should not face him alone, he said. And you should not follow me, she replied, though there was no real heat in her voice. He studied her expression. What did he say? That they own the future. And what do you think? She looked toward the horizon where the mountains rose against the sky. I think the future is being decided without asking the people who live here. He nodded slowly. That is usually how it goes. They walked together down the street. Townsfolk watched them, curiosity thick in their glances. The pairing of a desperate bride and a feared mountain man had become its own story. Why are you still here? She asked quietly. He could have returned to the mountains after rescuing the rancher. He owed the town nothing. He took his time answering. Because I've seen towns disappear, he said at last. Once the tracks are laid, everything changes. Some changes are good. Some are not. But no one ever asks the trappers and small farmers what they think. And what do you think? He gave a faint shrug. I think land should belong to the ones who work it. His words carried weight, shaped by experience. She wondered what had pushed him into the mountains in the first place. Had he lost land of his own? Had he once trusted men in fine coats? That evening, a town meeting was called at the church. Nearly everyone came. The railroad representative stood at the front, laying out plans with smooth confidence. A line of track would cut through the valley. A depot would bring jobs. Property values would rise. He spoke of opportunity, of connection to the wider world. Some nodded eagerly. Then the rancher rose slowly from his seat, still pale but steady. What happens to those whose land lies in your path? He asked. We will negotiate fair terms, the representative replied. Fair by your measure, the rancher pressed. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The bride felt every pair of eyes shift between the two men. She sensed how fragile the town's unity truly was. Greed and fear could divide neighbors faster than any outsider. From the back of the room, the mountain man leaned against the wall, silent but present. His mere stance seemed to remind everyone that not all power came from contracts. The representative's tone sharpened slightly. Refusal will only delay what cannot be stopped. Is that a threat? Someone called. It is reality, the man answered. The meeting dissolved into raised voices. Farmers argued among themselves. Some wanted to sign quickly before offers dropped. Others insisted on standing firm. Through it all, the bride felt the weight of choice pressing closer. If she married the rancher, she would tie her future to this fight. She would become a rancher's wife in a valley under pressure. She would help defend land that might be lost anyway. If she walked away, she would return to uncertainty, perhaps even poverty, and then there was the mountain man. He did not promise comfort. He did not offer a house or security. But when danger rose, he stepped forward without hesitation. He fought not for profit, but for principle. After the meeting, she stepped outside into the cool night air. The stars above seemed sharp enough to cut. You're thinking too hard, the mountain man said softly as he joined her. Is that possible? She asked. For someone like you, he replied, almost with a hint of a smile. She leaned against the church wall, arms folded. Do you ever wish for something easier? She asked. A quiet life with no fights left to fight? He looked out toward the dark shape of the mountains. Easier does not always mean better, he said. And quiet does not always last. She let his words settle. Behind them, the town's voices still drifted through the church doors, thick with worry and hope tangled together. In the distance, a faint sound carried on the wind. Not thunder, not cattle, a low, far-off whistle. She stiffened. He heard it too. That's not from here, she said. No, he agreed. The sound came again, distant but clear. A train, not yet in their valley, but close enough to promise change. She felt the future rushing toward them, unstoppable and loud. And somewhere deep inside, She knew that before the tracks ever reached their land, lines would be drawn in ways no one could undo. The sound of that distant train whistle did not fade from her mind. It lingered through the night and into the next morning, threading through her thoughts like a warning. The valley had always felt tucked away from the rest of the world, protected by mountains and stubborn will. Now it felt exposed. By sunrise, riders were already moving along the edges of town. Not ranchers heading out to check fences, but strangers marking land with wooden stakes. Thin strips of red cloth fluttered from them, cutting through pasture and field like scars. The rancher stood at his porch railing, staring at the nearest marker planted along his north pasture. They did not wait for an answer, he said quietly. The bride stood beside him. The mountain man leaned against a post a few steps away, arms folded, watching the horizon. "They're pushing," the mountain man said. "They want you angry." "Angry men make mistakes." The rancher's jaw tightened. "What would you have me do? Smile while they carve up my land?" "No," the mountain man replied evenly. "I would have you think." Inside the house, the rancher's brother paced like a caged animal. "We should pull those stakes out. Show them we won't stand for it." "And then what?" the bride asked gently. "They'll claim vandalism. They'll bring lawmen from the next county." The brother fell silent, frustration burning in his eyes. By midday, half the town had gathered along the marked line. Farmers argued with surveyors. The railroad representative stood off to the side, hands clasped behind his back, calm as ever. The bride stepped forward, her boots crunching on dry grass. "You were told no agreement was signed," she said. He glanced at her with a faint smile. "Negotiations are ongoing. Planting stakes is not negotiation. It is preparation," the rancher approached, shoulders squared despite the lingering bruise on his cheek. "You have no right." The representative reached into his coat and withdrew a folded paper. "We have claim through prior mineral rights registered before your purchase." The rancher's face drained of color. "That land was sold to me free and clear." "So you believed," the man replied. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some looked uncertain now. Mineral rights were tricky matters. Old agreements, forgotten clauses, lines drawn decades ago. The bride felt anger rise in her chest. "Show us the original record," she demanded. "In due time," he said smoothly. "For now, we proceed." The mountain man stepped forward then. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "You proceed without proof," he said. "That is a poor way to make friends." The representative's gaze hardened. "I am not here to make friends." The tension hung thick in the warm air. For a moment, it felt as though one wrong word could tip everything into chaos. But the rancher surprised them all. "You want proof?" he said. "You'll have it. I will ride to the county office myself and demand every record tied to this land." The representative inclined his head slightly. "You are welcome to try." The word echoed with quiet challenge. That afternoon, the rancher prepared to leave at dawn for the county seat, nearly a day's ride away. The bride insisted on going with him. "You're still healing," she said, "and they may not welcome your questions." "I can handle myself," he answered. She met his gaze steadily. "I know you can." "But I have read contracts before." "I know how to look for what others miss." He hesitated, pride and practicality wrestling inside him. Before he could answer, the mountain man spoke. "You won't travel alone?" The rancher stiffened slightly. "I don't need a guard." "Maybe not," the mountain man said. "But you need someone who knows the back trails. If those men are desperate, they won't rely only on papers." Silence followed. The bride felt the weight of that truth. The outlaws in the mountains had not been random. They had been a message. By sunset it was decided. At first light, the three of them would ride together. That night, the town felt restless. Lamps burned later than usual. Doors were checked twice. The promise of a railroad had split neighbors into quiet camps. The bride stood alone on the porch after supper, staring out at the dark pasture. Fireflies flickered like tiny stars fallen to earth. "You are not certain," the mountain man said from behind her. She did not turn. "About what?" "About marrying him." The honesty in his voice left no room for pretending. She drew a slow breath. "I came here because I needed stability, a home, safety. And now?" "Now safety feels fragile," He stepped beside her, close enough that she could feel his presence without touching him. "You deserve more than survival," he said quietly. The words settled deep. "And what do you deserve?" she asked. He gave a small shake of his head. "That is not the same." "Why not?" "Because I chose my path. You were forced into yours." She turned then, meeting his eyes in the faint glow from the house. There was something unguarded there tonight, something almost vulnerable. "You think I do not choose now?" she asked softly. Before he could answer, the rancher stepped onto the porch. "We ride at first light," he said, unaware of the undercurrent between them. The mountain man nodded and moved away. She remained standing long after both men had gone inside. At dawn they rode out under a sky streaked with pale gold. The valley lay quiet behind them, but she knew eyes watched from windows and fences. The ride toward the county seat was long and winding. They kept to less traveled paths where possible. The mountain man rode slightly ahead, scanning every ridge and turn. By midday they reached a narrow canyon pass. The air felt tight there, rock walls rising on either side. The mountain man slowed his horse. "What is it?" the bride asked. "Too quiet," he said. The rancher frowned. "It's a canyon. Sound carries strange." The mountain man dismounted and studied the ground. Fresh hoofprints marked the dust, more than 3 and recent. "They know we're riding," he said. A chill slid down her spine. Before anyone could speak again, a rider appeared at the far end of the pass. Then another. They did not charge. They simply blocked the way. The railroad representative rode forward from behind them, cutting off their retreat. "You should have accepted the offer," he called calmly. The rancher's grip tightened on his reins. "You follow us now?" "I protect my interests," the man replied. The bride's heart pounded, but she forced her voice steady. "Intimidation will not make forged papers true," he smiled faintly. "Forged is a strong accusation." "Then prove otherwise," she said. The mountain man shifted his position slightly, placing himself between the riders and the bride without drawing attention to it. "We are riding to the county office," the rancher said. "You cannot stop us." "I would prefer not to," the representative answered. "However, accidents do occur on narrow passes." The meaning was clear. For a moment, the canyon felt like a trap. The mountain man leaned toward the bride, his voice barely audible. "When I signal, ride hard to the right. There's a split in the rock about 50 yards ahead. It's tight, but you can make it. And you?" she whispered. "I'll follow." Her pulse hammered in her ears. The rancher glanced at her, understanding dawning in his eyes. The representative lifted a hand as if about to give a command. The mountain man moved first. His horse lunged forward, creating sudden motion in the still canyon. The bride kicked her mount into a run, heart in her throat. The world narrowed to pounding hooves and flying dust. Voices shouted behind them. Riders shifted. She spotted the narrow split in the rock just as he had described. It looked barely wide enough for a single horse. She did not hesitate. Her horse squeezed through, stones scraping against her boot. For a terrifying second, she thought they would be wedged fast. Then they burst out the other side onto a steep, winding trail. The rancher followed close behind. The mountain man came last, blocking the narrow entrance long enough to delay pursuit. They rode hard, not slowing until the canyon lay far behind. When they finally stopped to catch their breath, her hands trembled on the reins. "They won't give up," the rancher said grimly. "No," the mountain man agreed. "But now we know how far they're willing to go." The bride looked back toward the direction of the canyon. The railroad representative's calm mask had slipped, if only for a moment. This was no longer just about land or contracts. It was about control. As the county seat came into view hours later, a new wave of tension settled over her. Inside those offices lay records that could either secure their future or shatter it. And somewhere behind them, men with money and influence were already shaping the next move. She felt it deep in her bones. The valley would not remain untouched. And before the sun set again, choices would be made that could bind her heart and her home forever. The county seat looked smaller than she expected. After everything that had happened in the valley, she had imagined a grand courthouse holding the fate of ranchers and railroad men alike. Instead, it was a 2-story brick building with dusty windows and a flag hanging still in the quiet afternoon air. Yet inside those walls lay the truth. They tied their horses at the post and stepped onto the wooden walkway. The bride felt the weight of every mile they had ridden. The canyon ambush still echoed in her mind. The calm smile of the railroad representative. The red stakes cutting across pasture, it had all led here. Inside, the air smelled of paper and ink. A clerk looked up from behind a tall desk. "We need access to land records," the rancher said firmly. "Mineral rights tied to the north pasture outside Pine Valley," the clerk hesitated. "That will require review. We'll wait," the bride replied. They did not sit. They stood side by side while the clerk disappeared into a back room. The mountain man remained near the door, watchful as always. She noticed how out of place he looked in the tidy office, boots dusty from the trail, coat marked by weather, yet she also noticed how steady he stood. He did not belong to polished floors or contracts. He belonged to open land and honest lines drawn in dirt. After what felt like hours, the clerk returned with a stack of files. "These are the original filings," he said. The bride stepped forward first. She carefully unfolded brittle papers, scanning dates and signatures. Her father had once made her sit beside him while he studied loan agreements. He had taught her that fine print could hold more power than a gun. She found the original sale record from decades ago. The mineral rights had indeed been separated at one point, sold briefly to a mining company that never operated in the area. But her eyes caught something else, a later document. A transfer of those same rights back to the landowner after the mining company dissolved. She felt her pulse quicken. "Here," she said, pointing. The rancher leaned over her shoulder. The mountain man stepped closer. The transfer had been recorded and sealed. The rights had returned to the property long before the rancher purchased it. There was no active claim. The clerk adjusted his glasses. "It appears the mineral rights were fully restored to the estate before your purchase." The rancher let out a long breath, as if he had been holding it for days. "So the railroad has no claim," he said. "Not on record," the clerk answered carefully. The bride straightened. "We need certified copies." Within the hour, they left the courthouse with stamped documents in hand. Outside, the air felt lighter. But the fight was not finished yet. When they returned to Pine Valley the next day, word had already spread of their visit to the county seat. The railroad representative waited in front of the general store, posture stiff. "You found something," he said as they approached. The rancher did not slow his horse. "We found the truth." The bride handed him a copy of the certified transfer. His eyes moved quickly across the page. The calm expression he wore so easily flickered. "These records can be challenged," he said at last. "Not without proof," she replied. "And you have none." A small crowd gathered. Farmers, shopkeepers, families who had been holding their breath for weeks. The mountain man stepped forward, voice steady. "You tried fear, you tried force, now you try law. It seems none of it favors you." The representative looked around at the watching faces. The confidence that once shielded him began to thin. "This railroad will come through eventually," he warned. "Perhaps," the rancher said, "but not by stealing land." Silence settled. For the first time, the townsfolk did not look divided. They looked united. The representative folded the document carefully and handed it back. "This is not over," he said quietly. "No," the bride answered. "It is not," but this time her voice held strength instead of uncertainty. Over the next week, something shifted in Pine Valley. The railroad company withdrew its surveyors. The red stakes were removed one by one. Rumors spread that investors had found an easier route through a neighboring valley where landowners were willing to sell. The danger did not vanish overnight, but the immediate threat loosened its grip. The rancher focused on rebuilding his fences and restoring calm to his cattle. The town held meetings not about surrender, but about protecting what they had. And the bride found herself standing once more at a crossroads. One evening, as the sun painted the mountains gold, the rancher joined her by the pasture fence. "You saved my land," he said quietly. "We saved it," she corrected. He nodded. "You came here to marry me for security." "I understand that." She felt her heart tighten. Honesty was never easy, but it was necessary. "I came because I needed a future," she said. "And now?" She looked across the open field toward the distant tree line where the mountain man often rode at dusk. Now I know I want more than safety. The rancher followed her gaze. Understanding softened his features. You care for him, he said. It was not an accusation, it was a simple truth. She met his eyes. I did not expect to. But yes, he took a long breath, then gave a small nod. A marriage built on need alone would not have been fair to either of us. Emotion rose in her throat. I never meant to hurt you. You did not, he said gently. You gave me something stronger than a contract. You gave me a partner when I needed one. They stood in silence, the weight of what could have been settling into something peaceful. You will always have a place here as a friend, he added. Tears pricked her eyes, but they were not tears of sorrow. That night she found the mountain man near the edge of the forest, preparing his horse. You're leaving, she said. He did not deny it. The valley is steady again. My work here is done, her chest tightened. And what of your own land? She asked. He paused. I have land, he said, high in the mountains. It is rough. Not much comfort. I am not afraid of rough, she replied. He studied her face, searching for doubt. He found none. You would trade a ranch house for a cabin? He asked quietly. I would trade safety without love for uncertainty with it, she said. The words hung between them, clear and unshaken. For a long moment he said nothing. The wind stirred through the trees. The valley below lay peaceful, unaware of the decision unfolding above it. I have spent years alone, he said finally. It is easier that way. Perhaps, she answered. But easier is not always better. A faint smile touched his lips at the familiar phrase. You deserve a choice, he said. I am making one, she replied. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the lines carved by wind and time in his face. Not a feared mountain man. Just a man who had carried too much alone. If you ride with me, he said softly, there will be hard winters, long trails. No guarantees. There were no guarantees here either, she said. Only fear disguised as progress. He reached for her hand slowly, as if giving her time to pull away. She did not. Their fingers laced together, strong and certain. The next morning, Pine Valley gathered once more on the main street. But this time there was no silence heavy with dread. There was warmth. The rancher stood beside his brother, nodding respectfully as the bride mounted her horse. The mountain man sat tall in his saddle, no longer an outsider shadowed by rumor. You'll visit, the rancher called. We will, she promised. As they rode toward the mountains, the valley spread out behind them, golden and calm. The railroad threat had tested the town, but it had also revealed its strength. Land meant more than profit. It meant history, sweat, and love. She glanced at the man riding beside her. Their story had begun in fear and desperation. A desperate bride seeking shelter, a feared mountain man walking alone. A Western romance no one believed possible. Now it felt like something else entirely. It felt like choice. The trail ahead climbed steadily, winding through pine and stone. It would not be easy. There would be storms and setbacks. But there would also be shared fires, steady hands, and laughter carried on mountain air. As they reached the first rise, she looked back one last time at Pine Valley. The town stood strong against the horizon, unbroken. She turned forward again, her heart no longer desperate, but certain. In the wild heart of the American West, love had not come in the way she expected. It had not been arranged by advertisement or sealed by necessity. It had been forged in courage, in standing against greed, in riding through fear side by side. And as the mountains welcomed them home, she knew this was not just the start of a marriage. It was the beginning of a life chosen freely, built on trust, and strong enough to weather whatever tracks the future might try to lay across their path.